need a microphone because I tend to just murmur. But thank you for all for coming, and we're pleased to be here today to share our experience. We at Tuna Canyon, our president is here, Nancy Oda, here, and her husband Kay, the treasurer, and our speaker, Sigrid Toy, is also on our board of trustees, so board of directors. My story begins with even before December 7th, when there was so much prejudice here on the West Coast in California. My father came here in 1899 from Japan. He was 20 years old at the time, and he came after the Exclusion Act of 1893, when they stopped bringing in Chinese laborers to work on the gold mines and the railroads. My father heard that the streets in America were paved with gold, so he wanted to come, and he told his parents, after I make my first million, I'll be back in Japan. Well, he never made it back to Japan because he never made $1 million. But he worked on the railroad up in Idaho, Montana, laid tracks. Then after that, somehow he made it down to Southern California, to Hollywood, California, where he had a company called Hollywood Day Workers, and he would send out gardeners and domestic people to the movies, people in the movie industry there in Hollywood. I was born in Hollywood in 1932, and it was 1941, when December 7th happened. We didn't know even where Pearl Harbor was. We didn't know, I didn't even know where Hawaii was at that time. But they said Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and we immediately became very frightened. I remember sitting by the radio, and there were people from my mother and father's church, Buddhist church, having a prayer meeting at our house. Well, in the middle of the prayer meeting, we had a knock on the door, and the FBI came and said they wanted to take our priest away, our priest that was leading the prayer meeting. So he grabbed his hat and they took him away. Everybody in the community was frightened. Immediately, all the Japanese had curfew of 7:30, and you couldn't be more than 5 miles away from your house. So if you had somebody in the hospital, you couldn't go visit them. If you had a family member living in another part of the town, like my brother lived in Glendale, we couldn't go visit him. The next day, all the city, county, and state and federal workers were fired from their jobs, and all the university classes, all the students, Japanese students, were forbidden to come back onto campus. In all of that time, we were very scared as to what would happen to us, because, they had said things like, the Japs multiply like rats, or else they would say, if a viper lays an egg, when the egg hatches, it is still a viper. Those were things that we would read about ourselves in the newspapers. LA Times, Examiner, Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants out of California. And in Tuna Canyon, people like Sigrid's father, German immigrants were being arrested, Italian immigrants were being arrested, and Japanese immigrants were being arrested and taken to Tuna Canyon and held there without any hearing, without any reasoning. And even people here in the Santa Barbara area, I interviewed a woman who lived on the Armour Estates in Montecito. Her mother and father were teaching Japanese classes in a church here in Santa Barbara. So they took both the mother and the father away from the children. And she remembers crying and crying, but she didn't know anything else as to what happened to her parents. After I interviewed her, about a month later, she passed away. But I remember their stories, and we have archived them into our Tuna Canyon archives and the Japanese American National Museum archives. Sigrid will tell you more about her father's arrest and her personal story. But that was from the Presidential Proclamation 2525, 2526, and 2527. 27 was Italians, 2526 were German, and 2525 were the Japanese immigrants. And even today, that law still stands, and they're threatening immigrants again by using that same law that's from 1798 to arrest immigrants and send them to places we don't know where. So we are very frightened about that. We hope that it would never happen again to anybody, but it seems like it's going to happen again, or threatening to be happening again. So my story is much more simpler than Sigrid's. You'll hear from Sigrid, but this is me when I was a child, and our dog Chippy. We saw a sign, we saw a sign on the front telephone post in front of our house that said we have to evacuate in 1 week, and we didn't know what to do. Our postman said he'll take care of our furniture for us and our house for us. We had a 3-bedroom house, a kitchen, dining room, and living room, and my mother was growing plants in the backyard as a nursery, and she was washing and ironing clothes for the, I forgot the name, sorry, a playhouse in Hollywood. So when we were taken away, we couldn't take our pets with us, no pets allowed. So my father took our dog to a neighbor's house, and hopefully he had a nice life. This is a home that, from a 3-bedroom house in Hollywood, the next night we're sleeping in a horse stall in Santa Anita. And I've been back to the horse stall in Santa Anita this past few years, and I saw it and I couldn't believe how small the horse stall was. My mother, my father, and I slept in the back room, and my brother and my sister slept in the front, we call living room. We had to shower in one big building with a partition in the middle for men on one side and women on the other side. And my mother said, just face the wall and you'll feel like there's nobody else in the shower room with you. So this is me in camp. I turned 13 in camp, and I have to tell you that our parents, we really thank our parents and the older nieces for making our life as normal as possible for us. We went to school, we had libraries, we had parties, we had baseball games. They made baseball diamonds for the boys and football fields for the boys. And we had a regular school, and everything was done. There's a Japanese saying called kodomo no tameni, which means for the sake of the children. And for the sake of the children, I have to thank my mother and my father for making us feel like our life was normal, and that we should have fun, and that we should go to school. So on the top you'll see the guard towers where the military guards were told if anyone tries to escape from camp, you are to shoot and kill on sight. So we're surrounded by barbed wires. And that below is a photograph of my barrack, and on the right hand side is our mess hall where we all ate at 7 breakfast, 12 for lunch, and 5 o'clock for dinner. And if you miss those meals, that's it. There's nothing in your room that you can cook a meal. So you have to make sure so this is a barrack that housed 6 families, 2 large families on the outside room, a couple or a single person in the next room over, and the middle rooms were for smaller families. So there were 6 of these barracks on each side of the mess hall, 12 barracks to a block. We had 36 blocks in our camp, which was in Aurora, Arkansas. We were shipped by train after 5 months in Santa Anita while they built these camps. There were 9 concentration camps we call America's concentration camps. Nothing like Germany's horrible Holocaust death camps. But they were still called concentration camps because we were all in one place and we could not leave. Fortunately, the Quaker organization started signing up and saying that they will take young college students out of camp, and they would be their financial supporter. So my sister left camp to go to a beauty school in Minnesota. My brother left camp so that he could work in Chicago. My soon-to-be brother-in-law, who was a UC Berkeley student, was able to go to a college in Missouri. And because of the kindness of the Quaker families, and I have to tell you that not only the Quakers, but there were so many people who were very, very kind, showed such kindness to us while we were all in camp. And I really want to emphasize that. So that's my girlfriend and I playing on teeter-totter that our parents built for us. That's a picture on the other side of my 5th grade class. And our teachers were brought in from local Arkansas, Mississippi, Oklahoma, outside teachers who would come into camp to teach. They outlawed all of us from learning Japanese language. They said, no more Japanese language school. Then we got, yay. We were so happy we didn't have to go to learn Japanese language school. But in order to keep the older people happy, they said we can do Japanese dances, have Japanese kabuki plays, and play Japanese instruments. So we learned Japanese dancing, we learned a lot of the culture, we learned a lot about arranging flowers and things like that. So we, from Aurora, Arkansas, we would go to Detention, Jerome, camp and perform. And that I'm on the second one from the right. And I just found that kimono this summer. My mother had kept it for me in a suitcase, and I didn't know that. And I was going through my kimonos this summer, and I found that kimono, so I still have that orange kimono that my mother kept for me. Oh, excuse me. Okay, my brother, Tom, was married and had 2 children, and he volunteered to fight for the U.S. Army. And he wrote a letter as he was being on the ship being transported to Italy that he wanted the war to end soon, and he wanted to be a part of that. So he volunteered. He was one of the lucky ones to come home. He fought in Italy, France. They were able to liberate, the 442 were able to liberate 2 towns in northern France called Brière, Bellefontaine, and even to this day, they reenact that liberation. They pretend like they're the Japanese soldiers and have a big celebration of their liberation from the Nazis. The other picture is my other brother, who is still alive today. He's 98, 6 years older than me, and he was known as a zoot suiter in camp. He had to have his pants pegged like the zoot suiters, and he was a big jazz fan, so they named their club Bojangles after the very famous African-American tap dancer. And we used to watch them dance, and then we kids would copy them, and so we learned to dance. And we used to jitterbug, and we had parties, and we would have dances, and we even listened to the hit parade so that we could hear what was the most popular songs in the United States. And remember hearing Frank Sinatra, Perry Como, Joe Stafford, and we would just wait every Saturday night to hear what were the popular songs on the outside. So we did everything, our parents did everything to keep us happy in camp. So I just want to finish with this quote. This is the last scene, leaving Brewer, Arkansas. All of a sudden they said to us, they found out that the Constitution says you cannot keep us locked up. So they said, now you're free to go. But we didn't have any place to go because we couldn't come back to California yet. And so we ended up in Denver. And the quote is from a haiku poet that says, I value freedom until you are locked up. And I have to say that the United States, President Reagan issued an apology from the American government. And when I heard that apology on the radio, I was on the 405 freeway, I started to cry. And Senator Inoue would also say, whenever he started his speech, that only a country as great as America could offer an apology. And he said, he reminded us that hate has got to be taught. That's a very famous musical in South Pacific by Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rogers that said, hate has got to be taught. You have to be taught very carefully by the time you're 6, 7, or 8. You have to be carefully taught. So my plea to all of you is that we show kindness, that we show graciousness and patience with each other all the time. Thank you. I'm going to be